Good evening, my name is Emily Aman, and today I will be discussing international expansion, primarily looking at three different countries, Spain, Chile, and Peru, all of which have very similar styles in leadership and culture. The Spanish and South American culture really does focus on relationships, very different than the US. So international expansion, there's a lot of different areas to look at. There is a focus in the presentation on the cultural and leadership differences, because ultimately the way that a multinational corporation comes in can have a difference on how the country and culture perceives it, and ultimately the success of that multinational corporation. When looking at an expansion as well, we are going to look at foreign direct investments, the economy, kind of a SWOT breakdown of each culture and country and entering it, and ultimately deciding which of the three would be best for expansion. The first country we're going to look at is Spain. So a country that this European country began a democracy in 1975, and then the passing of their leader actually benefited the country. They were able to focus more on human rights and equality. Unfortunately, Spain and the US did have some differences over fighting over some land that the US did actually win. And so the countries, the US and Spain, have been developing a relationship and building. Spain primarily does focus a lot in Europe and building those relationships. But the government has been updating after they did fall behind quite a bit in the Industrial Revolution, and so they began to slowly grow and adapt to become a first world country and ultimately Europe's fourth largest economy. They've done this by focusing more on labor laws, internet piracy, and taxation, which are really more likely to attract international business, especially the US. They do have strict and complex legislation, which has led to more difficulty in growing the entrepreneurship and small businesses, which we'll take a little bit more closer look at here in a bit. Also, Spain has developed these criminal codes, which has helped grow businesses and the trust in businesses. This is important because it really breaks down the law and ethics and what Spain kind of thinks of who should take responsibility in the business world. So the Spain's criminal codes really just states that the company is not liable when there are unethical or illegal behaviors. It is more focused on the people who have abused and broken these laws. So the criminal codes define directors' responsibilities. So if a company were to falsify accounts, other company information, decisions that may abuse power that negatively affect the company, the protection of shareholders, withholding of documents such as government tax, or even unfair or unethical management behavior of assets, tax-related crimes. So again, the company itself is not liable, but the person who has committed the acts and abused their position. Like stated before, the Spain and US are still working on creating a relationship, and something that is really important to building of this is their close military relationship with the US. They are actually allies in the fight against terrorism, and this is super important to building that trust and building that relationship. Spain has allowed the US to have a base stationed in Spain. So, like I went over earlier, Spain and the U.S. do not have a super tight trade relationship and a lot of ties through the economy. Spain primarily does participate in trade, but they really focus on more European countries, so they primarily export to France, Germany, and Italy. There has been, so really the top industries in Spain, and primarily more of what their economy is based on. So lower one, which is actually pretty high though, even though it only has 3.4% of the country's GDP, is wine, olive oil. Fresh vegetables are primarily produced in Spain, so a lot of stuff that the U.S. does think of when we think of the Spanish culture and some of those exports. The second highest industry is tourism. Spain has the second largest in the world of tourism. So the thing about tourism is that it branches out into all these different sectors that can increase the economy. So industries such as hospitality, the local jobs, restaurants, local attractions, travel, accommodation, food, souvenirs, even to agriculture, fuel, water, electricity, construction, and back again, like I said, the local jobs and increasing employment. So tourism is definitely something that is huge in Spain. As well as the increase in revenue, it does bring in a lot of different cultures, a lot of different countries that international travel. So the country does get to see a lot of different cultures, has a big view on accepting cultures. They have the love for art and kind of building that relationship and love for others. The highest industry is Spain is manufacturing and technology. So technology industry holds 70% of their market, and the manufacturing industry is expected to grow 2.8%. Unfortunately, the economy isn't all highs. The economy does have extremely high levels of unemployment. This followed the Great Recession. So the record high of unemployment in 2013 was at 27%, which is extremely high. The average for the country all around has kind of teetered around the 17%, but they've seen in 2018 it's actually increasing. So it is something to really note when you're wanting to deal with business in Spain, is why are all these high levels of unemployment, and it's not something that they've really been able to wrap, especially with all these jobs in the tourism and the manufacturing and technology industry. There has been increase in exports, especially between the U.S. and Spain. So while they are not directly have a trade relationship, there was a national export initiative that has increased U.S. imports from Spain by 25% to 10.8 billion, and the U.S. has grown to Spain's sixth top trading partner. So definitely seeing a built relationship, seeing a growth in the two economies wrapping in the trade together. So like we said, a big focus on doing relationships with Spain and doing business within Spain is the cultural difference in the leadership styles. So Spain is very vibrant, influenced by by art, has high influences from the Catholic Church, which really ties together with their family and relationships based. They're very closely knit, not only in their families, but in the culture altogether. The average income and social norms are very close to each other. There's actually a small distance of rich to the poor, with the top fifth of the population is only 4.4 times richer than the bottom fifth. So very, very close relations. There is lack of training and funding for the workplace, but this is something that ties together with the difficulties in small businesses and entrepreneurship, which the U.S. does look closely. So that's something maybe that looking at expanding, looking at their human resource management and why there's that lack of training in the workplace. There are cultural dimensions of Hofstede that are seen not only in Spain but the other countries as well, very much in the Spanish culture and Latin American cultures. The high uncertainty avoidance, they don't like change, they like to keep things kind of the way that they are. This shows in the job retention is extremely important to the Spanish culture. Long-term orientation, again going with that job retention. Individualism and masculinity as well. Something that is the same or similar with US is kind of how they perceive their leaders. They like the charismatic, clear with directions, the leader they look to as having the answers and knowing the answers. But what is different is that it is a very high emotional culture. So they do better with actions. They're very expressive and animated. Affection is very much commonly seen in doing business, which is very different from the U.S. You know, we're kind of rigid and business is business, and this is something that you'll see across all three countries, is something that the U.S. needs to be aware of when doing business relationships, that trust and relationship building is first and foremost important before getting into the dirty deeds of the actual business proposals. So to break down kind of the strengths, weakness, opportunities, and threats of moving in with Spain, huge strengths of the country is that they are improving their competitiveness, not only with trade but other industries. You're seeing that they are realizing that they need to keep innovating and investing in new markets and new industries to be able to continue to stay in the top of the European cultures. Another huge strength is that international tourism, having all those different countries, having all those different ties, and having that giant kind of place where they can see all these international, not only cultures, but open up relationships internationally. Opportunities is to, again, increase with trade outside of the European countries, especially with the U.S., increase in foreign direct investments, and build their relationships. So opportunities all around, kind of just being able to expand outside of those close-knit European countries that they are very comfortable with. They have success, but being able to grow as well. A weakness is that those high levels of unemployment is not something that was just spiked after the Great Recession, but it's something that is being repeated. So seeing why that high levels of unemployment, especially when job retention is so important, and building that trust with the U.S., building those business relationships, building trade. Threats goes in kind of with unemployment, but the fact that small businesses and entrepreneurship is so unproductive and they see such high failure, and it's not something that the country really embraces, especially with a lot of their legalities. It is concerning with wanting to move in and do business relationships with them, that they're not very open to the small businesses. Also, as a huge multinational corporation, you do not want to come in and kind of outshine these small businesses that are already struggling to succeed. The next country that we'll look at is Chile. So it's a South American country, has a huge long coastline. The Chile is very similar to the Spanish culture as far as being relationships, trust are of high importance. Chile also kind of had a rough past. They had a very bloody reign dictatorship dictatorship, excuse me, of Pinochet had, I mean, the history and past of Chile is just heartbreaking, but they have kind of evolved, and they have their new president, who is also chief of the state, head of their government, and they do have a similar branch system to the U.S. So they have their legislative branch, their judicial branch, and executive branch. And similar to Spain, they are heavily influenced by the church. So the Roman Catholic Church has a lot of say in the legal, political, and kind of their cultural values and views. All right, so Chile, while they are still growing and kind of rebuilding from their tough dictatorship, they are thriving. They've taken their past, they've learned from it, and they're growing. A huge benefit of Chile is their number of free trade agreements. So currently at 25, so they have one of the largest number of bilateral free trade agreements. And what this really shows is their openness to foreign direct investments, growth of trade industries, exporting and importing. So the U.S. And Chile do have a free trade agreement. The U.S. is Chile's largest trading partner. Second following is European countries, and third is other Latin American countries. And we'll jump back to this, but there is something that I do want to mention is a little bit concerning, but we'll come back to this. Like I said, is that the country has declined joining the North American Free Trade Agreement. So you kind of keep that tucked in the back of your mind. But the foreign direct investments is expected to increase with an average foreign investment of over $1 billion. So right now they have over $27 billion foreign direct investment stock. Important industries in Chile, and I'm sorry I kind of jumped ahead, but is primarily agriculture products. They have salmon is one of the huge ones. Also fresh fruit, wine, planting, seed, manufacturing is also huge, and then they have a growth of international call centers. The cost of international call centers is so low, and it's one of the lowest price long distance prices. So you're seeing a lot of industries opening new call centers in Chile. So the culture and leadership is very much less dominant than the U.S. So success and money and those other values that we see held really high in America are not as important to Chile. Their values are more on social and family interactions, very more towards a feminine structure. So they do rely on rules. They do put importance on the quality of life. This can, and I'll come back to the achievement versus ascription culture, but with their more lax and pessimistic, it also goes into their work culture. So you won't see them stressing about 8 to 5 or clocking out 30 minutes and being right back on their lunch break. They do take their time, which will, for U.S. Would be very hard for leaderships to kind of adjust to. So there are also other differences with the leadership and the culture. So the U.S. is very much achievement-based. We are motivated by doing the best and seeking rewards from that, where the Chile culture is more ascription. So the success and motivation are approached differently in the Chilean workforce. They do want to see more of a participative and supportive leadership. That also goes into the synchronized leadership style, which are when they're making a decision, they're looking at more of the cons and the threats of what could happen. This kind of shows by their high uncertainty and the Hofstede cultural dimension. So decision making takes a little bit longer. They want to look at kind of all the pros and cons and going into shareholders. So that is something that is different in the business world as well. Besides their interaction, their affectionate relationship, a more laid back, trust and relationship building first, business last. It'll also take them a little bit longer to make a decision. So the SWOT analysis of Chile, a huge strength is going to be their free trade. Their foreign direct investments is increasing. Their economy is extremely stable. Their political system is stable. So all around, they have a great foundation and are continuing to grow. Opportunities are increasing the political democracy a little bit more, and regulating those laws a little bit of political parties. Weaknesses is that they do rely heavily on their exporting industries, so their fish and salmon, as well as manufacturing, are kind of all, it's heavily relied on. So if those two industries would kind of weaken, you would see a huge shift in their economy. There is income inequality, so there's a big kind of gap in between the rich and the poor, and the lifestyles, which can create some difficulty when doing business relationships and looking at your employees. The threats is there have been an increase in protests, primarily focused on the popularity of the government. So that is something that when coming in and doing business and looking at the government, you want to be careful with that culture. The last country we'll look at is Peru, another South American country. It is more or less developed than Chile. They do have kind of a similar rocky past, are working on building. By doing so, they have implemented in 2010 a new labor procedure law, which has updated laws regarding employment contracts, issues regarding foreign workers, outsourcing arrangement, and employment termination. So definitely working on, as they're growing, to be able to improve the politics, the legalities of employees and protecting them as well. There are some corruption issues in the country. It remains a challenge. There's been some scandals with politicians. So they do have a new president who is working on fighting their corruption, working on economic growth, creating more jobs with social benefits. Improving education and health services is one of his main priorities. And they also are a constitutional democratic republic with a multi-party system. So like we said, Peru and their new president is really focusing on growing their economy. So in this growth has been in the mining industry. They do have fuel manufacturing services. The U.S.'s foreign direct investment is $6.9 billion, so definitely growth in there. We do have a U.S.-Peru trade agreement, which went into force in 2009, which has increased incentives for economic and social cooperation between the two countries. Peru has also been growing in their free trade agreements, and really kind of getting more into international trade, foreign investments. Their GDP has had a growth of 5% from 2008 to 2017. Really, a lot of it is thankful to that mining and fuel and manufacturing industries. So again, kind of breaking down, they really have continued to grow and are getting more aggressive in international business. With the growth in international business, has put some stress on the country as far as leaderships in Peru needing to now focus more on ethical orientations and integrity behind the leadership. Really understanding that now that they grow, they need to continue to maintain a positive relationship, a positive reputation, understanding of more individual performances and how it affects an organization's success. So the biggest issue between Peru and the United States and their leadership is that they're almost complete opposite. So Peruvian workers are not charmed by the US's confidence and charismatic manner. It actually comes off very rude and untrustworthy. So the different leadership styles that we would need to focus on is being more individualized in the consideration, so elevating more on a personal and relationship-based level, focusing on work-centered tasks, but also employee task performances, really getting to know the employees, what is going on in their life, and having that close relationship. So breakdown of Peru. So strength is their natural resources in the mining and agriculture industry. Opportunities are their work on e-governance and being more transparent of their administration process and easier interaction with government agencies, opening up those doors. Their weakness, similar to Chile, is they're dependent on their resources, which could result in unstable commodity prices. Threats in Peru, unfortunately, they do have high drug-related activities and crime because of the industry of the cocaine industry and the drug trafficking has a high crime rate. So there are also, another threat is legal risks with the high income. There also are threats in drop in poverty levels. So 1/4 of Peruvians still remain impoverished. That corruption, there's also the narcotic trafficking with those drug-related crimes, which the new president in 2016 has addressed and is working to decrease those and increase their platform on improving Peru's economy overall. So breaking down, the culture and leadership styles across those three countries are very similar. Huge importance in trust, importance in relationships. The business interaction is going to be a lot less or a lot more casual. They really want to build that relationship with business owners and not, go in talking straight business, handshakes. It's more casual. It wants to feel more of a relationship building to increase those business relationships. A big hesitation with Spain is their lack of foreign direct investments and trade with the U.S. While it is improving as a developed country, there should be a lot more of the trade going back and forth, where Spain is really just kind of focused on European economies and building those relationships. Chile does have the open free trade agreement and is increasing the foreign direct investment, but has the all of their eggs in one basket with their economy and their industries. Peru is still continuing to grow. but they are experiencing growing pains, and it is something that they're going to need to work through. And ultimately, the industry is still a little unstable to kind of be entering. They still have a lot of growth to do in technology, in training, in education. So Peru will be potentially a great business relationship, but at the time that the economy is at, and maybe in the next 5 to 8 years, with the new president and his platform of improving the economy and decreasing the crime, they may, see a little bit better of a stable investment. But Chile, they have proven to be a stable market in not only their economy, their government, but in the trade market. They are one of the experts in foreign direct investments. They have one of the highest in all countries. So they do really have proven that they are great at working with other countries and investing in the country, especially with their growth in the call center industry. That's going to only be seen to grow and continue to boost. And overall, their long-term sustainability, their legal transparency, and just their overall welcoming to the U.S. investments and corporations. The only concern with Chile is the differences in work culture. So entering that market, there are a lot of things to be considered. The main thing is the leadership style and our style of business. We can't be going in full force. It is something that we need to build a relationship, build their trust, and use other different techniques of leadership, and really understanding their culture and what's important to them, to be able to improve business and enter their market. So overall, between comparing the three countries, Peru, like we said, still has a lot of growth to do. They are still not advanced enough in internet and technology, while Spain is a leader in the manufacturing industry. The trade agreements and the resistance of joining free trade agreements is a concern. So overall, Chile, with continued partnerships through trade agreements and relationships, definitely a great country to invest in.